Hello, and welcome to our long-awaited 15th episode of TrekPrime. And what happened was a couple of weeks ago, Jeff told me about a comment that he had seen on one of the videos. I don't know which one it was. I don't know if you do, Jeff, per se, but
12 or 13, I think.
yeah. Okay, so it was one of the recent episodes,
Yeah.
and it was regarding how choppy and inconsistent Jeff's audio was, and I hadn't really noticed it until Jeff and I did some test videos, and I talked to Captain Stuart Foley, who's a friend of mine, online over on Trek Yards. Shout out to you, Trek Yards, and Captain Foley, and Stuart Cockling's over there for their help. And what he did is he suggested we try Skype again, and the audio was good there, but the free recorder that I used that Stuart gave me a page for messed up my computer and started to freeze it. So we were trying to think another solution. So Jeff called Zoom. He did a lot of extra work, and we concluded tonight that it was actually probably the connection on his computer was too low somehow. But we're still working out some kinks. But he's on another computer. The audio problem is worked out. So hopefully this will be, at least at this point, a better podcast.
Yeah.
So, in terms of quality. So, I want to make sure everybody can be heard, because that's the whole point of these. You don't want, if you're trying to do a podcast where you're talking, you don't want people with bad audio. That defeats the purpose. It's counterintuitive. So anyway, our subject is one that, of course, has been gestating in these 2 weeks, and it was Jeff's idea, actually, and it comes from a site called IO9. We Come from the Future, written by a Mr. Mark Strauss in May of 2009, and the title of the article is called "Is Star Trek a Religion?" And that's not what this podcast is about, but the article inspired an idea that Jeff had, and I'll let him take it over from here.
Yeah, I read this article, and they were talking about, Star Trek being, or Star Trek fans actually being regarded as a cult. And it kind of hit me funny when they use the word cult, because in today's world, I mean, when we hear the word cult, it kind of sends shivers up our back that it's, some sort of a negative label or something like that. But if you look up the definition of the word cult, you get two schools of thought on it, because you got one definition that uses the word religion in association with people who are very dedicated, devoted followers of that religion. And then on the other definition, you have the word organization being used in place of religion, and being and having people really devoted in following that.
Right. Well, now that you mention it, I did look up cult on Google, and there are 3 interesting definitions, and I wanted to read them to you and see if you could apply any of them to what you're talking about.
Okay.
And I see one right here. The first definition of cult is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. That's what you were talking about, generally the negative end of the cult.
Yeah.
The next one is a relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister. And the third definition is a misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing. Now that I think about it, a lot of these sound like they don't really fit into, per se, a positive or a negative place, but could be used in that way.
Yeah.
You say that most definitions of cult, at least what you're seeing here, could be interpreted in that gray area.
Yeah. And, I mean, and like I said, it's just, because today when we hear the word cult, I mean, it obviously terrorism is something that comes to mind right off the bat, because of, but if we're going to technically use the word cult, I mean, I suppose in a way you could say Star Trek fans can be sort of a cultish kind of thing, because they really love Star Trek and the principles that it stands for. It's not necessarily religious. I mean, it's just something that, people agree. And it's like, people believe in the Constitution doesn't mean we're a cult, because we're people, Americans, that believe in, in the Constitution. We're just, but with Star Trek, I mean, you look at the fans out there, and and how, we go to show up to the conventions, and we wear, the uniforms, and we talk about Star Trek, and we meet the people who acted on it and people who write for it and stuff like that. And, we really regard these people with a lot of admiration because they've done that and they've made it such a good thing. So I suppose the outsider who doesn't really like Star Trek could look at that and say, oh, these people are out of their friggin' minds or something, and they just, I've heard it all. I mean, I've heard it from people that have said that, people didn't like Star Trek at all, and they just think that these people are weird. They don't understand it because they don't like Star Trek. But like I said, it was a word that they used in that article that I just felt like maybe they're trying to say that, maybe they're trying to say like, is the word using cult as a word to describe Star Trek fans in a negative way. You know what I'm saying? Is it, like they're taking the word cult as a negative word and they're trying to apply it to Star Trek fans, but it's really the wrong launching point for that argument because the word cult is really not a negative or positive. It's just a word. It's a gray area. So,
well,
go ahead, Andre. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Now, I didn't want to interrupt you. I'm just a little out of
No, I'm just saying, go ahead.
One thing I wanted to mention now that you get on the idea of using cult in a negative way, and this wasn't used in this particular instance, in the couple of weeks since then, I was reading a book that Jeff loaned me, and we're still working out how to put pictures in here. Thank you very much. Insert pictures. But we'll do that a little later. Let's just take.
We're getting there, people. We're getting
get the audio working.
Yeah.
Let's just keep it where it is and not, But anyway, the point is that he loaned me a book that was about the recently late Harlan Ellison's City on the Edge of Forever. Now, if any of you out there, Star Trek fan, you probably all know who Harlan Ellison is. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure he's infamous. And the reason why I would think so is because he essentially built his entire career on what I would describe would be a one-sided beef. And you all know what that beef is. It regards the City on the Edge of Forever, and I read the original teleplay. But the point is that he described, this was in the 1990s he wrote this, he described Star Trek fans essentially as people who were involved in a religious cult that surrounded merchandising and money. That this was all a publicity stunt to sell T-shirts and toy phasers and plastic communicators, basically saying, oh, pass around the collection plate to Star Trek fans, you can get a free tricorder or a free uniform or whatever. He described, but that was part of his beef, of course. But I'm just saying, when I read into that, I told Jeff over here, hey, again, I'm hearing the Star Trek as a cult here, but in a very negative way, like you read in the article. Now, here's the question I want to ask, and this is an age-old question. I mean, you could do this with any fandom, but I want to ask about Star Trek in particular. Why do you think that a large group of people, and I don't think it's a small group, a large group of people would see the Star Trek fan cult? We'll call it that, fan cult, because that's what DeForest Kelley called it in that famous Tom Snyder interview that may be up on YouTube right now. That included Ellison, by the way, if you want to hear the beef. But if you haven't already heard it a million times. But I'm just saying that why do you think people view the Star Trek fan cult in a negative way? I know.
Well, like I said, I mean, I think it's, people that look at it in a negative way are people who really don't like science fiction, I think, or would even be watching science fiction in the first place. I mean, I let's say I go back, easy for me to think of as my father. My dad was not a science fiction watcher. I mean, he liked Hogan's Heroes and watching comedies, All in the Family, or he liked watching the news, or or movies that he had on hand that were, anything but science fiction. And I mean, he couldn't even really like watching, Star Wars, for all the action that was in it. It's science fiction. So whenever I was watching Star Trek, he looked at it as something goofy and I'm wasting my time. And it's like, why are you sitting here watching this? You could be outside playing or doing some homework, So I think it's in a way, and let me turn the table here a little bit. I don't like sports. Okay, I don't watch basketball, football, baseball, anything sports. I'm not into it because unless you're playing the sport, what fun is in there in watching somebody else play it? You know
I
what I'm
feel the
saying?
same way. I am the same way.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So to me,
Sorry, sports
when I see sports fans out rioting in the streets because their team lost a game, I think, people think of Star Trek fans being eccentric, but you don't see us out rioting in the streets when the Klingons win a fight against the Enterprise.
Brought up an excellent point because I
You
saw
know?
it in one of the Facebook Star Trek groups.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember growing up, we'd be watching Star Trek: The Next Generation, and they'd show these. You remember how they had those previews of the music and everything? Like,
Yeah.
here's the next episode. They'd, like,
Yeah.
this is so great. You were going to see this, and then you tune in the night it was going to come on. You'd see a bunch of people throwing balls around, and they'd say, "We're going to join the show like half an hour into progress." Womp womp.
Yeah, they
So,
didn't even
okay.
bother to hold it for you. They just played it anyway while it
Right.
was on.
So, like I said, you'd be pumped up for this show, and then you'd come on, and you would see and then the game would go on, and be this after show, and then you see the last 25 minutes of the episode, if that.
Yeah, they didn't even care that they were bleeding into somebody else's show. They couldn't even stop it.
I pretty much described half of Star Trek's fourth season because they were preempting it with all these games and.
Yeah, because it would go into that season where it was, what was it, football? I think they play that at that time.
Football would be preempted a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's like a few episodes where they would just bleed right into it.
Right. Just to make a point, my reasonings for not being into sports are the same as you. I'd rather play it than watch it. Period.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if I'm gonna play a sport, I'd rather just shoot a hoop than watch some other guy shoot a hoop.
Yeah.
I don't care how talented Michael Jordan is. That's fine.
Yeah. So I don't understand the fandom around sports.
Right. You just want to play, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
And I have no objection against people who are into it. That's your thing. That's cool. But you're right. And I've noticed this. You'll see people on sporting events. They'll be dressed up in all these paints with these beer can things on their heads, the 2 beer can things. And they'll be dancing around. And then those same people will turn around and they'll say, "Aren't those Star Trek fans ridiculous for how they behave?"
Really?
We don't get out there in our Star Trek uniforms saying,
So yeah, I mean,
we all did that though.
We could easily call the sports fan the sort of a cult because of how
exactly. Now, some sports fans now that I talk to get real about it. There's
on
Facebook who are like, "I'm a big sports fan and a Star Trek fan," and I'm telling you, the Star Trek fandom is more benign.
Yeah, way more. Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine somebody at a convention in a Star Trek outfit doing some crazy little rubber dance? Like, we want Voyager, we want Next Generation,
I mean, we're quieter about it. I think, we keep to ourselves about it more than anything because society kind of kept us that way.
I mean, like I said, and then people in the 80s and 90s, you remember this about Star Trek fandom. Gene Roddenberry himself addressed this. You do this, they say, "Oh, he's a Star Trek geek."
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, it's totally appropriate to say, "Go Patriots!" Like,
I mean, and people, neighbors have. And neighbors will get into fights because they like the opposite team. I mean, there'll be real fights going on, back and forth over stuff.
Yeah, and then of course we get into you mentioned an incident. I should probably let you tell the story that actually involved Jerry Ryan of Star Trek Voyager that dealt with this in the sci-fi world. I'll let you take it from here. Yeah,
I mean, I was watching this on YouTube, some old convention footage from a couple of years back, and there was Jerry Ryan was in one of them, and how they have this question and answer part in all these conventions that you go to. They was doing this with her, and somebody stood up to ask her question, and the individual was wearing a T-shirt with Star Wars logo on it, and everybody in the room erupted, went boo, boo, and she kind of jumped in on the microphone and said, hold on. She says, we're Star Trek fans. We're supposed to be accepting of diversity and everything. And all of a sudden it quieted down and people started to clap a little bit, And I'm thinking, that's crazy because you go to these science fiction conventions and every aspect of science fiction is usually represented there. You got all kinds of walks of life in there, from Star Wars to Lost in Space to Star Trek to you name it, it's there. And for someone to show up at this, and they're wearing a Star Wars T-shirt and everybody's booing it, I mean, where do they think they're at? It's just, it's not right. It's science fiction.
Yeah,
you can be allowed to like other things other than Star Trek if you want,
It's just, it gets to that, again, like Jerry Ryan pointed out, she didn't say it, but that's almost like how sports people are.
Yeah.
If you study sports fandom phenomenons, they have those famous soccer riots where people can get killed.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you. They might boo somebody. I never heard anybody going after a Star Wars T-shirt and a sort of saying, "Bring out the guillotine."
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, you
Really.
don't. I mean, like I said, honestly, mostly it's just, well, this is my show. This is your show.
Yeah.
But nowadays, if you see the conventions, you don't have a Star Wars convention. You don't have a Star Trek convention or Stargate or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other sci-fi.
Or
Lost.
Battlestar Galactica or something like that. It's or Battlestar Galactica or
Right, you don't have these
something
separate.
like that.
You have a Battlestar Galactica or a Star Trek or a Star Wars or an X-Files or a Firefly or a
Yeah.
whatever booth or Andromeda booth at a sci-fi convention.
Yeah.
So everybody's kind of intermingling.
Mm-hmm.
So why would it be that somebody would wear a Star Wars shirt at a sci-fi convention? Everybody's intermingling.
Yeah.
I mean, a Star Wars fan with a shirt might go over to a Star Trek booth and vice versa.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of hard to have this weird exclusive over here.
Yeah. I mean, every convention that I've been to, that never came up. I mean, I seen that on that video, and I thought it was odd because, like I said, I've been to other conventions, and no one ever made a fuss like that. Yeah, they never made a fuss like that before, and I thought that was weird that they would do that all of a sudden. I was like, where are these people coming from? They.
I mean, if you're at a sci-fi convention and you go over to a table that specializes in Marvel merchandise, where you have a Spider-Man T-shirt on, are they gonna say, "Oh, that's DC, it pops on you,"
Yeah, really.
Like, well, it's superheroes, leave it alone.
It's all superheroes, Marvel or DC. It's superheroes.
But it's like, I'm sure there's brand devotion in that universe too, but to me, I don't really care about that. Like I said, I remember when I went to see Star Wars when they remastered it the first time, not the other times they remastered, but the times they remastered it in the 90s.
Yeah.
I would kind of tell Star Trek fans like that, and I go, I'm like, well, it's Star Wars. I just never seen it. I was just curious. I do watch other sci-fi.
Yeah.
Watch other sci-fi. Star Trek is my thing, but I've watched 2001. I've seen Alien before. And that goes back to the cult thing. People think that people in Star Trek, that's the only thing they actually watch. Like, that is the only show they will watch. Oh, I don't know. I don't think every Star Trek fan, again, fits into that neat definition.
I never met a Star Trek fan that only liked just Star Trek for science fiction.
Neither have I, but some people think that they are. They're devoted in some cultish way.
It just happens to be that if Star Trek is my personal favorite of the sci-fi genres out there, but I'm not going to turn my nose up at like Alien or Battlestar Galactica or Lost.
Right, exactly.
I could still get as much fun watching them.
It's nothing to check out. You like it or don't. I mean, or Doctor Who for that matter. There's all kinds of other things.
Can watch that,
There's whatever you like. I mean, there's variety is a spice of life. But
it's a buffet. Pick and choose what you like.
You're right. And now they're set up like buffets. They have different tables, so you think the sci-fi community be more diverse. So that's why that's surprising when you mentioned that Star Wars thing. It's like they don't have separate conventions anymore.
No,
they're
certainly
all put
not
together.
Yeah.
So there really shouldn't be an opportunity for all this. Yours is better than mine.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's kind of exploring the other universe. And most people now, it's surprising. Most people right now are kind of into sci-fi in general as a general concept.
Yeah, because there's a lot there to see.
One thing I wanted to bring up about the sci-fi cult, I don't know if you know about this. I think a lot of people in your father's age group, I'm not sure him in particular, but a lot of people in his age group, people born in the 1930s, 40s, whatever. Sci-fi is a genre, from what I understand, until Star Trek, actually, was considered a genre for teenagers, Buck Rogers serials, usually the B movie before your main feature. You'd go to see, I don't know, Betty Davis or Clark Gable or John Wayne or whoever was in the theater at the time.
Yeah.
But you'd see a sci-fi B movie starring a Captain Proton figure like from Voyager.
Yeah.
And that's what sci-fi was to a lot of people. It was kind of like a cheap teen-based, almost like a superhero thing. So I wonder if a lot of people in the 70s and 80s who were middle-aged and adult then, because my grandfather was that way. He looked at sci-fi. Whenever he saw Star Trek, he saw it through the eyes of the old Buck Rogers stuff.
Yeah.
Like a comic book thing. The idea of future fiction, that this was something that could actually be theoretically based on our future, eluded him.
Yeah.
He saw Ming the Merciless or something. He just...
Yeah.
He saw an older sci-fi when sci-fi was, and that's why Gene Roddenberry did Star Trek. He was from that same generation. I'm sure he saw all that Buck Rogers stuff.
Yeah.
And probably thought, well, they're interesting ideas, but how did he put it? Not enough characterization, not enough motivation, and that's why he did Star Trek.
Yeah.
He saw a movie called The Day the Earth Stood Still, which was a sci-fi movie that was actually pretty interesting.
Yeah.
From the 1950s. So I think maybe, do you think that some of the perceptions of Star Trek as a fan cult is a little generational too, that way, that some of the older people used to sci-fi as being kind of a jokey genre?
Yeah, I think that kind of bled over, to people who don't like Star Trek at all. They listen to that from their parents or something like that, and so they carried on that stigma, that label, to this day. They still use it.
I mean, there are people who just don't like sci-fi just because they don't like sci-fi, and that's cool.
Yeah.
But like I said, I don't hear everybody in that case. The word I hear now a lot, as opposed to cult, is fandom.
Fandom, yeah.
And of course, we can have that conversation too. What does fan short for?
Yeah, fanatic.
That's fanatic, which could apply to a cult.
Yeah.
So you see kind of heavy words like fanatic, or abbreviated to fan, dome, fanatical, dome, whatever that, or you have cult.
Fanatical dominated or something. I can't remember.
Fanatical dominated. I guess you could say that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So there's this negative connotation. Now, here may be a harder question for you. What do you think might be a positive advantage of Star Trek having a cult following? I mean, what do you think it might do good for the Star Trek community?
To have a cult following. Well, I mean, we kind of started off the conversation with the idea that technically, Star Trek fans could be considered a cult because we do have a loyal following.
Right, that's the basis. Yeah.
People that are following Star Trek because they believe in Roddenberry's principles behind it. So, I mean, are you asking me how would it be if the cult became sort of a negative?
Well, no. Well, we talked about the negative aspects of how Star Trek cultism could work, but I just wanted to know because sometimes, like you said, cult isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing.
No.
I was watching this episode of Next Generation called Descent.
Yeah.
You know it out there. Data kills a Borg. There's a reason why, but he thinks that he's starting to feel emotion. He's talking to Troy.
Yeah.
And he says to him, feelings can't be good or bad. It's how we express them that makes the difference. And I think that's how it works with cults. It's not a good or a bad term. It's like, what's that term we use is similar? Propaganda. It's not a good or bad thing. It's how it's used.
Yeah, how we're using it, yeah.
Right. And I think that's the thing with cults. Basically, is there a way that the cult, like the smaller cult phenomenon of Star Trek, could be used to a positive effect, to a positive measure? To a positive end?
Well, I'll tell you, we would have to, as a society, stop looking at the word cult as a either or kind of thing, like a negative, and just look at it for a word as it is. I mean,
I see. So you think the idea of cult could be the key to understanding it?
Yeah, I mean, because like even when you listen to the media and the news, especially the news, I mean, whenever they want to talk about some bad news or something like that, and they see a group of people and they immediately try to identify it as a cult. So, I think what we got to do is we need to stop using that word or come up with a word in place of a negative kind of thing to fill in, instead of it, have cult as your mediary kind of thing, and then you have a word negative, side of that cult and call it something else, and then the positive side would call that something else. But cult would be sort of the broad definition of all of it together,
I noticed a term going around, I don't know if you've heard it, the Star Trek community.
Well, to me that sounds more positive because
right. Well, the reason I mentioned it, community has a much more Roddenberry connotation.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's like people getting together. People get together just to talk about Star Trek. It's not like a bad thing, or it's not,
Right, because I mean, fandom sounds harmless at first until you realize that fan equates to fanatic. So it makes it sound again cultish.
Yeah.
But like I said, I haven't really heard the term cult applied to Star Trek a lot recently. Maybe you have. I really haven't.
No, I mean, like you said, that interview where DeForce said it really is one of the few times I've ever heard that word ever used, you know.
Well, in the 80s, I would hear about, like we talked about the other day when we had lunch, Lord of the Rings was described as a cult book.
Yeah.
You know, but I think the word cult then was used to describe the term elitist. Like, well, I don't know about elitist, but like, this is a book that a select crowd are into.
Well, okay. Let me say.
But that again is a messy thing.
The movie Blade Runner. It didn't quite do so well in the theaters, but for some reason that movie, people still watch it, they still like it, and somehow the media interpreted that as a cult following. I don't even know if you could use that word even to describe a following, you know, a small group of people that are following some, you know, if that's a cult, because they just happen to like the movie. I mean,
you think
it may not
the word
be
cult is not even usable in terms of a fan community?
For this particular thing, I don't think it does, because I mean, what principles behind Blade Runner are these people agreeing with? You know, Blade Runner isn't about principles so much as a possibility of the future. You know,
well,
you know what I'm
like
saying?
I said,
it doesn't follow a thing like that.
Like I said, could you apply the term cult to a lot of modern sci-fi that revolves around dystopia?
Oh,
I mean, wouldn't that
like this post-apocalyptic
right, which
stuff?
is basically the plot of most sci-fi I see coming out today.
Yeah, it's true. Everybody seems to be into that now.
Right. If you apply a cult following to that, would that be saying that a group of people want to have a lousy future? I mean, if you
again, that doesn't seem to fit that cult.
Right, the cult word just isn't really usable much anymore, is it? When you come right down to it,
not to that. I mean, there isn't any base or principle that you'd want to follow with a post-apocalyptic kind of thing.
I guess you would call it maybe a masochistic interest. Like, I don't.
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
or maybe like drinking your sorrows away. I don't know. Like,
unless there's some kind of lesson to learn out of it, you know, like after the aftermath of it, there's some kind of bigger
YouTube people will know what I'm referencing. But there's a really lousy Christmas cartoon. I don't even want to go into how lousy it is. It's become the bane of the internet.
Well, no, which is this? Because you lost me there on that one.
I'm sorry, because when you talk about lessons that are learned, I always use this as an example. It's a Christmas story that's basically a bad parody of Annie. And usually at the end of Christmas stories, you know, especially for kids, they always have this thing where, well, we learn the spirit of giving or whatever. At the end of this, they're like, we've learned that you always win when you are good. So it's like, what? I mean, this is Christmas. What does that even mean? It's this really vaguely undefined thing.
Yeah.
The show is called The Christmas Tree. It's a train wreck of a cartoon. But it's the bane of a lot of people's existence. It's one of those things that people I watch ironically. But how weird would it be if Star Trek ended like that? Well, Picard and his crew learned you always win when you're good.
Really? I mean, 7 years, and then that's all it comes down to is that.
You told Picard, oh, here's a secret to your mission. You always win when you're good. It's like, what? You learn what? You know, I'm just saying that it was a sloppy writing is what it was.
Yeah.
But, you know, you could tell somebody just was like, we got to finish this up. Let's write this little thing down for the message at the end, tag it on.
You know, now that you think about it, a lot of the Christmas stories, you know, really are kind of sloppy writing in a way, because you don't really get a big point out of anything except, like you said, you got to be good, you know.
Well, like I said, usually it's you have to learn the spirit of giving or that, you know, the Grinch can't stop the Who's from singing, but in
the Who's, God,
you will see somebody saying, "Oh, the Grinch learned you always win when you're good." It's a cheap way of ending something, and you know, I hate to say this. Sometimes the way Star Trek is now, I wonder if that's going to come up. Oh, well, the crew of say Discovery learned you always win when you're good.
Oh God,
some really cheap, easy platitude. And now, see, to me, I don't see how something like that could really inspire a cult following. I mean, that Christmas show I talked about, The Christmas Tree, people watch it ironically. Like, this is a cautionary message, how not to make a movie. Don't do things like they do. That's kind of how they do it. Like, this is, maybe that dystopian thing is the same way. It's like, this is where we don't want to be.
Yeah.
I think people watch that and they're like, well, remember, if you want your site to be good, you better do the right thing because you'll end up like them on that movie or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas Star Trek says that we have a place to get to. Now, I can kind of see how a cult could form around that, because a lot of cults, people follow something in a cultish way because they want to see things get better.
Yeah.
That could be it. But on the deeper question, and it's a very basic question, at the end of the day, maybe you already answered it, I don't know, because there's a lot was being discussed here. You said you don't think cult is usable for sci-fi generally, especially Star Trek.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any aspect of Star Trek fandom at the end of the day that is at all cultish?
Cultish. Oh, well, okay. I mean, I'm sure everyone that's ever met or, let's say going to a convention or been in a Star Trek club has probably maybe run into a fan or something like that who really takes their appreciation of Star Trek to a very extreme way. And,
Okay.
I was a member of a club that, they kind of had some weird things going on in it where everybody had to wear the same kind of uniform. Well, I mean,
That
they
was the
didn't.
Red movie ones, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they wanted people. They didn't require it, but they sort of made you think that you should wear the Star Trek 2 uniform with their
Right,
group.
with the pins and everything.
Yeah, which
So,
overall is you're looking at about $400
right, you
for
have to buy all the
things
pins, which were
that
expensive. If you bought the,
most
how is that
people
word
are not.
pronounced? Costleon. What was that word they called them? The pins, the gold pins. They had I can't pronounce that word. Colision. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't know.
Some big word they use. I don't remember. So, help me out if you know how to pronounce. You know what I'm talking about. It's a type of pin. It begins with COI.
Yeah.
A lot of S's in it. I don't know how you pronounce the word.
Yeah.
I'll have to look that up someday. But you have to order all the pins to put in, then you have to have the patterns made. It builds up in price. It's heavy and bulky. And
yeah.
But anyway, the thing about that is that, so you think that the Star Trek cultism is not so much devoted toward the show, but more amongst the fandom.
Like how they want everyone around them to believe as they do. Like, say you got one person. I mean, you told me about some guy that says every character on Star Trek had to have a first name, and he was mad that people weren't using it.
Okay, that was his own thing.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, let's take this guy for an example.
Let's take that universe.
Let's take that guy as an example and say he's running a Star Trek club, and that everyone that joins that club has to use the first name to all, the ones that he created for that thing. Now, to me, that would sound a little bit cult, like a
right. If he was going around convincing everybody that all Star Trek characters need to have first names, or
that would sound more like a negative side of it.
Right, but in his case, it was really his own thing. It was wasn't. He was just was his own personal rule. I think he was trying to form an RPG group or something.
Yeah. So if you're trying to take something like that and twist it, I mean, we see people in religion, an offshoot of religion where they'll do that. They'll take and interpret the Bible their own way, and then they have a following.
Right. It'll start with there being their own thing, but then they'll make everybody else think it's their thing.
It's like there's one thing they don't agree with this religion, and they'll take it out and they'll form their own group because they don't want to follow that because of that one thing. So they take it out. But the thing of it is like with Star Trek, and when you got someone trying to create stuff to add to it, that really wasn't ever in Star Trek to begin with, and they're adding things into it, and they want everybody else that likes Star Trek to believe the same thing. That's kind of being a little bit,
right.
believe, this way.
So it's more approach than the actual construct.
Yeah. So there are Star Trek fans that'll do that.
But it's not the whole fandom. Is what you're saying.
It's not the whole thing. I mean, so you got a variety. You got a scale, from mild fan to extreme fan, and I think a lot of us kind of go in the middle there a little bit. We don't go the way or the.
And by the way, to paraphrase somebody else here, I know that I'm very well aware that I'm using the term fandom in order to decry it. That's the way it's coming out. I can't think of a better word right now. I mean, we're not about picking and choosing words here. We're just talking about this issue. Yeah. But one of the issues I wanted to bring up, and this goes, again, a little outside Prime, but I don't see how we can avoid it. And I've seen this applied, is this whole thing with the post-JJ Discovery thing, is that a form of cultism? That's one thing I've seen brought up again and again. Or is that more people understanding Star Trek a certain way?
Well, okay, that's a good point.
Which basically is asking the question, are we cultish?
are we as Star Trek fans capable of allowing it to develop into something else?
Right, basically asking the question, are you and I cultish? I mean, I know that sounds weird, but that's basically the question I'm ending up asking without thinking about it.
That's kind of like saying, okay, you know, I like this kind of soup, but if you change the recipe, I ain't going to like it. You know, is that cultish if you don't like the soup?
Or is that more arbitrary preference?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know. I mean, that, I think, you know, it's what's going on. We'll just take what you're talking about. I think what's going on with Star Trek now is that they're trying to change the things around in a different way, and hoping people will like it this way. But I think for a large part of the population of Star Trek fans, they're not getting that it's really that positive a thing what they're doing.
Well,
and now they're kind of getting mad about it, and they're trying to say we're just too conservative thinking, we're too cultish in our thinking. And it's really about, like what I said, do you like the soup with salt or without salt? You know, it's like, you know, you know, it's, we're changing the recipe here a bit, you know.
I use an example of a soup I know. It could be like a saying that comparing Star Trek to gumbo, which is a type of soup that requires a base called a roux.
Yeah.
Now, if you take that roux out, you're going to have a decent enough soup, but it's not going to be a gumbo.
Yeah.
I think the basic gumbo is this base, this roux. So, like I said, if they're giving us gumbo without the roux and saying, well, it's still gumbo, it's not gumbo. The roux makes it gumbo.
That's right.
You know, so it's actually, I guess the point is that's actually legitimacy. But like I said, it's probably not about a real Star Trek argument here, because the whole thing about modern Star Trek is really rooted in business. Okay? Yeah. I'm not going to get into it, but it's rooted in business.
Yeah.
And maybe it's more that the Star Trek community just don't like the business of it.
Yeah.
Let's just make it easy. And I mean, if you go on YouTube, there's a million videos about this. We're not about ragging on things that aren't Prime Star Trek, but again, Prime Star Trek all of a sudden is a word that never was there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, look at it like Coke. You know, at one time you had Coke. It was the real thing, whatever you want to call it. Then you had New Coke and Cherry Coke and Vanilla Coke. And, you know, they introduced the original recipe, but then people said, oh, it doesn't taste like Coke anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, how much can you dilute something until you've destroyed what's originally there?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's more what's happening.
And I think too, at the same time as we're also seeing, like you said, the business part of Star Trek, we as fans are starting to see or wake up more to the idea that, you know, there's a lot of business going on behind the scenes with Star Trek that we didn't really know. And it's taking it
over, and it's
I mean, like this thing with the CBS All Access thing, which was really a piss poor way of getting people to sign up to that.
Right. Like I said, that could be every other Star Trek video on YouTube right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, dangling Star Trek in front of us like
carrots. And like I said, I hate to say this in a way, forcing that discussion takes away from the important discussion of Star Trek.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at what's the world events right now, what Star Trek was saying in the 60s and the 80s and in the 90s with Next Generation and TOS, wouldn't that kind of Star Trek be very vital today?
Yeah.
But instead, what's happening is that we're getting not so much Star Trek, but Star business. We're getting a big business, and it's legality, and it shows. I mean, every show has legalities and things they have to work out, but it really sticks out. It really shows in this, and it's uncomfortable. And like I said, perhaps, like you said, maybe that's not a cult thing at all, because when I read a lot of articles about it, they're like saying, oh, aren't you Prime Universe people? Aren't you a little cultish? And it's more like, well, no, like you said, I guess it comes down to the fact that are we, two of us, cultish? And it takes away from the real definition of Star Trek doing that.
Well, at the same time, when they ask that question, they're also part of that cult because, like I said, the word cult is really not a negative or a positive thing. It's just a word describing people who like something.
Right, like I said.
Yeah.
I mean, but I never thought I'd see a day where Star Trek would be divided into camps.
But it is.
Or we would need to have a video called TrekPrime.
You know, when that started with the camps thing is when they started coming out with all these spin-off series, you know, where you had Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise. That's when people started saying this one's better than that one, or, you know, I like this one better than that one, or something like that. Then that's where it started to begin right there, was that. The
But still, it was
camps.
more of a creative kind of camp.
Yeah,
It wasn't based in this is just not Star Trek at all.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
okay, there was a little of that with TNG, but that's based on an assumption.
yeah,
Like, Star Trek is all about characters.
yeah.
Next Gen had to prove that.
Mm,
DS9, there was some, well, it is, if they're not really going through space, it's not really a Star Trek.
mm,
I don't know if Deep Space Nine proved anything on that level, but
yeah,
whatever. But Voyager was a Star Trek. They were in space exploring, albeit in an area we didn't know, but they were out exploring.
yeah,
Enterprise, they were exploring, yet they took the Star Trek name off it for a while.
yeah,
I don't know why.
yeah,
So it's just, but those are creative differences. Now, there's an argument that something isn't Star Trek at all.
yeah,
And that's something I never heard before.
yeah,
Because, obviously the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, they all existed, presumably, in the same world as TOS.
yeah. But I do remember some fans that said that, people who really like the TOS Star Trek when the Next Generation had started, a lot of people didn't even want to watch that because they said that's not the same Star Trek.
Yeah, I've been there because
Yeah.
they were thinking Star Trek was Kirk, Spock, and Bones.
Yeah.
And that who cares about the Enterprise if they're not on it?
Mm. Yeah, it was like that,
And now, basically, we're getting told that, well, it's the same exact thing with the Discovery in the JJ universe.
Yeah.
But it isn't. And it's not so much that it isn't, it's the idea behind it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, TNG's like, hey, they're 75 years ahead of Bones and all that, and Kirk. And they're still out there. That's why they had Bones in the Encounter at Farpoint. Like, they're still there.
Yeah.
Kirk was still there. He wasn't non-existent in this universe. They just slipped ahead.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the Next Generation was taking place during Kirk's time. Like, oh, James Kirk, who's that?
Yeah.
It was in the future. So it was okay. It was part of that history.
Yeah.
But now they're asking us, and I will say this Star Trek appears to be a legally, utterly gutted show that we have now. Legally gutted.
You're talking about Discovery?
JJ and now all that. It's legally gutted. And then they're trying to say, well, you have to accept it as a new thing like you did Next Generation. Next Generation wasn't legally gutted out of being Star Trek.
Hmm.
You have legislated Star Trek systematically out of this. So I guess the whole idea is that, it's a difference between accepting a new version of something that's still in the same universe or still in the same history, or somebody trying to rewrite it for business purposes.
It's the easiest way for me to think about J.J. Abrams' Star Trek and Discovery is that instead of trying to find ways to include that into the Prime universe, I just say, look, these shows exist in a different dimension that we know exists because we've seen different dimensions in Star Trek episodes. They exist out there. So this is a universe. This is the JJ verse.
But now we've got Star Trek multiverse, which sounds really strange. Yeah. We got that.
Yeah.
And Prime is a little part of this multiverse.
But it's not a new concept. I mean, it's been done in comic books, with like the various Supermans that from Earth to
or even the Mirror Universe in TOS or DS9.
Yeah. So, I mean, in a way, we can excuse it by just saying it's just another universe or another dimension parallel to our.
But like I said, even saying that it isn't is a business thing.
Yeah.
But like I said, again, this is causing a problem in the fandom. Because now it's not even, this is not Star Trek because of characters. It's like, this doesn't even feel like Star Trek.
It's because a lot of people that are not, they're just not accepting of something to watch and with the name Star Trek on it as being, this is what we have to watch because there's nothing else Star Trek unless reruns. They want to see something, they want to see a continuation of what they've been watching after Nemesis. And instead we got kicked back to 100 years before, and now we're back to square one again. It's like, we don't want to go back. We want to keep going forward. It's like,
you're rebooting Star Trek.
Yeah.
But you really need to.
Yeah.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think that one of the issues is that not so much they even did that, but it's creating a disaster in fandom. I mean, you look at any live stream about Discovery or the JJ universe.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's more of a powder keg. I mean, I wonder what the internet would have been like during Next Generation, how the Next Generation reaction would have lit up Twitter or or YouTube or 4chan or whatever.
Back then, we could only go by the magazine articles that were written in the
Right,
comment
and the
sections.
occasional ask whoever, or
Yeah.
and once in a while, if you talk to somebody, they're like, "Well, I grew up with the old one," but I still see that as based in nostalgia, though.
Yeah.
That I don't know if that was really based in fact, like, well, I just have sentimentality over Kirk and Spock as characters.
Yeah.
Basically, the vibe I would get about Next Generation was, oh, that's so for the kids. But it would be somebody who was 30 in 1987.
Yeah.
Somebody who
I can get. I mean, I can understand trying to warm up to some new actors and stuff like that. I mean, we had to go through that in every spinoff of Star Trek that came after Next Generation.
Is it me, or did the Next Generation fans generally respond a little bit, maybe not totally, but a little bit easier to?
Yeah, they did, because we went so long without something fresh on TV for 20 years. We only had the movies.
Well, right. But I'm just saying that when Deep Space Nine came out in Voyager, there was issues with the writing of those shows.
Yeah, and the direction they were taking it. Yeah.
But nobody ever said we can't accept new characters.
No, I mean we kind of learned our lesson with Next Generation, that
right. Because Next Generation stuff, we don't need the old characters anymore.
Yeah, we learned.
Star Trek can be. So, like I said, I'm all for starting with new characters. That's what Star Trek's all about. Go into the future, have new characters. Go to another ship, have new characters.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be Picard all the time. It doesn't need to be Kirk all the time, or Janeway, or Cisco.
That's right.
Whoever it is. But just make sure it's actually Star Trek, and you didn't just slap that name on something that isn't.
Yeah.
Make sure you've got your cards on the table.
Yeah.
So, I guess, does that make us cultish, or does that make people who say that wise?
It's like you told me before. We don't want Star Trek handed to us on a trash can lid.
Right. We don't want that trash can presentation of Star Trek, where it's like you had that great steak peppered up just right, spiced up just right. You put a metal trash can in and say, "Here you go, nice steak, bad serving."
Yeah. Just
it's all in the presentation.
Yeah, if you're going to do a Star Trek, at least have something in there that we can recognize, and feel that it's principles and moral story, and it's not just zap and kill, bang.
Enterprise the credit for. At least it had a feeling a lot like Star Trek.
Yeah,
you can nitpick whether it looked right for what it was supposed to be, or whether the technology was this or that. But they had a Star Trek feeling in it.
Yeah, at least the stories had things in it that
were... Right. It had the ethical arguments that Star Trek had. It allowed that to develop, albeit some of the writing was weaker than other times, but it was there at least subliminally.
Yeah.
So I accept that Enterprise is kind of like, okay, this is what they did before. Okay, that's their thing. But now it's like, enough of the prequels, and don't make fans fight with each other just so you can get your show on the air.
Yeah.
Basically, the idea I get is like, well, we want, and this is based on conspiracy theorizing, but humor me. It may seem like, well, we want all the Discovery people over here, and the rest of you, forget it. Like basically they're trying to divide and conquer. It's just that's what they're doing.
That's what they're doing with Star Wars fans at the same time. I remember they were saying, I read somewhere online, or was in a magazine or somewhere, where they were saying that the Star Wars fans, my age, are, we don't care basically about what you like. I mean, we're targeting the younger audiences. So, you guys are too old. We don't, and I'm like, hey, if it wasn't for us, your Star Wars wouldn't even be something you can play around with,
Right, right. I mean, who wasn't it the people who are 50, 40, 60 now?
Yeah.
People who lined up around the block to see the original Star Wars, lined up halfway across town to see Empire Strikes Back, bought tickets maybe 3 months in advance, and maybe waited in tents to see Return of the Jedi in the 80s and 70s.
Yeah. I mean, what the hell's wrong with us? Why do we have to be, excluded now?
You're the ones who kind of made that happen,
Yeah.
And it's like with Star Trek, I said, did I beg my mom and my dad to have me stay up for a whole hour when I was 7 years old just so I can see a counter and Farpoint to end up in this situation?
Yeah.
They sound a little grandiose, but it's like people who made sacrifices for this, people who bought your items, people who wrote fiction about you, people who tuned into their television sets to watch your show.
Yeah.
What more do you possibly want? We watched your show.
Yeah.
We supported your show. We wrote magazines. We wrote fan fiction. What about all those people who spent their time and money licking stamps and sending out letters to keep TOS on one more year? What about the B. Joe Trimble campaign? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, would they have done that for this stuff?
Yeah, I mean...
I mean, something about that show inspired people to have this historic letter writing campaign you just can't ignore.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see, I mean, because the way it looks now, I don't think Discovery is going to last beyond a second season, you know, in my opinion. You don't see people out writing a letter or anything, or letters to try to demand to keep Discovery on the air. So apparently, you know, that should say something right there, you know.
Right. I mean, if TOS inspired that kind of thing,
yeah,
you know what people are looking for.
Yeah.
There was something there with TOS that people saw, you know, that wasn't reflected in a lot of other things that really just grabbed their attention and they could get into. And I'm going to tell you, this is how I feel. If they decided to play around with the Next Generation and screw it up and take it off the air and say season 3, there'd have been a letter writing campaign twice that big then.
Yeah.
I mean, once that Locutus thing was over, they had the Next Generation audience really into that.
Yeah, the longest summer in history there was because of that, the way they ended in the best.
Well, I just wanted to mention this. This may sound very fanatical myself, but I remember I used to watch Star Trek The Next Generation, like, oh, this is a cool show. When that Locutus thing happened, I would go out. I went, that was before the summer hiatus from school. I remember talking to my friends and having discussions.
Yeah.
I mean, discussions. We're like 10 years old. And we're talking about, okay, is Riker going to kill Picard? It was like our Who Shot JR.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is like our Who Shot JR of the Star Trek elementary school set.
Yeah.
I mean, I was sitting around talking to my friends, and it was all, Locutus, is he going to do it? Is he going to fire on him? You know, because remember they had that fire.
That's where they dropped it right there, you know?
Right. It's like, is he going to kill him? Is he going to kill him? It's like, is this going to be the end of Picard? There were discussions. I wish I had like an old beta cam to have recorded me and my friends in 4th grade.
Yeah.
Having this very serious discussion about TNG when it was still right on the air.
Yeah, I mean, I had friends that they swore up and down that was how they were going to get rid of Patrick Stewart and
right.
Jonathan.
The same discussions came up with us. That they're going to get rid of him.
And that the woman would be the first officer. Who I can't remember her name off the character.
Elizabeth Dennehy.
Yeah, the visiting lieutenant commander. They remember
Shelby.
Shelby, yes, Shelby.
Yeah, the Elizabeth Dennehy character.
She would be the first officer, and Riker would be the captain. And
they were changing up really big.
Yeah, they said, yep, this is the way they're going to get rid of him, and you know he killed him, and that's the end of Picard.
And I remember around that time,
there
were actually fan club magazines locally that would have these discussions and these forums because there was no internet then.
That's right.
So people would actually have to write in and have these written BBSs, and and I'm sure there were club meetings where these roundtable discussions. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
So this was like Star Trek had its Who Shot JR moment here.
That's right.
And so I'm like, Next Generation is cemented for a little while.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this show's been going on. It's doing pretty well. Now we've got a reason for being here.
Yeah.
Whether Picard survives or doesn't, there are life-changing consequences for this character.
We found out that there was people watching that show in a big way, and that at that point on, Next Generation became a legitimate part of the Star Trek.
Right, so that's when it really kicked off and got into this huge thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, season 1 had its issues, but I don't think it was half as bad as people think it is. Season 2 getting a little better. Season 3 got really good. Then at the end of it, it was like it just went from being this for Star Trek fans only kind of thing to this mass thing.
Yeah.
That Locutus thing really broke it out of the box.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you notice that the shows in season 4 started getting focused on family and interpersonal issues rather than just straight sci-fi plots.
Yeah.
Where they were trying to bring in younger people, and they were trying to, this younger audience who were watching it like, is he going to kill him next year? You know? I mean, because they never did a cliffhanger on The Next Generation yet.
That's right.
They had the menagerie in season 1, but that was a wraparound. You know, that was a wraparound of an old show.
Yeah.
But they ended that off like we kind of know what's going to happen in the next one.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you saw Kirk firing up, pointing at Spock like, I'm going to fire on you, to be continued.
Yeah, they never did that.
I mean, we had a life consequence here at the end of Best of Both Worlds Part 1, where that could have been the end of Picard.
Yeah.
Riker could have very well, boom.
Yeah.
Well, he tried to, but we all know what happened. But I'm just saying that that could have gone the other way.
Yeah.
Like they said, they could have gone totally the other way. So, like I said, all this taken into consideration, that level of excitement, that level of vested interest in a character, do you see, if you want to call it cult, do you see anything in today's Star Trek that could inspire that kind of following?
Oh, okay. I'll say up front, I haven't seen a single episode of Discovery. Okay, because
I mean, the way it's being conducted, I mean, everybody talks about the idea of Star Trek Discovery, but not much about Discovery itself.
Yeah.
It's the conceptual idea of it, that trash can presentation.
Yeah.
But you don't hear a lot about the consequences of the characters. They're kind of...
as far as the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, I mean, I don't care if they blow up the Enterprise in every movie.
Well,
it's just,
that's a reboot of characters we already know.
Yeah, I mean,
they're not new characters. They're just
what they've done is they've gotten into a sandbox, which is Star Trek, and they're just playing around in the sandbox. You know, the 50-year sandbox that the fans have created.
Basically, the basic universe is a Traducan thing.
Yeah.
It's like they're just reheating old stuff.
Yeah, so there's nothing there to keep, really that kind of interest going, like what you was talking about, best of both worlds.
When you think about it, instead of doing these new Star Wars movies, they just could have hired younger actors and totally remade the original trilogy.
It's a good thing they didn't do it.
Right. I mean, they could have just taken. They could have just taken Alicia Silverstone and slapped those cinnamon buns on her head.
Oh God Almighty! I can't think of any actor today that could play those roles.
I mean, can you imagine if they JJ Star Wars?
Oh.
If they just totally remade the movies and just pretended it was new.
I think the Star Wars fans are mad now with Disney running it. Let Disney try to do a reboot of that original trilogy or see what happens there. Holy God!
Well, and again, one element I see this also called cultish is when, and I brought this up because I think, when do we start disguising the word remake as reboot? Let's face it, these are remakes.
Yeah.
Reboot just sounds cooler. It sounds like you're trying to reboot a franchise. You're not. You're remaking a show.
Yeah, because if you're rebooting something, it's like you're telling the same story, but you're telling it differently. Like, let's say it's reboot Star Trek: The Motion Picture. It has to have the same story, but just a little bit of difference. Like, the ship looks different, or the crew looks different, the uniforms look different, but it's still the same story. That would be considered a reboot of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, because it's still the same story. It's just got different visuals.
Yeah, these are remakes, and let's not pretend there's something that they aren't. So I guess back to the cult thing. I mean, could this be a daisy chain topic where everything just kind of leads into one long, extended plug-in of subjects, or is there some conclusion to this cult thing that can be agreeable? Is the word cult usable at all in fandom? Is the word community more applicable to a lot of these things?
Well, I think community sounds better for one thing. And I think, a community of Star Trek fans, a community of Star Wars fans, a community of science.
It sounds so much more loving and so much more supportive.
Yeah, I mean, even if you want to say the community of sports fans sounds better than,
Right, because then rather than we're here to rat on the opposing team, it's more like we're here to support our home team.
Yeah.
You take the most positive aspect out of it.
Yeah.
Into it, rather than, because some people, when you mention cult, it sounds like we are the only way to be.
Yeah.
Star Wars over here, we're the only way to be. Star Trek, we're the only way to be.
Yeah, we're stubborn.
Where it's like, where a community is like, well, something? Star Wars is one way to look at it, Star Trek's another.
Yeah. We have an open door thing.
The community, it seems more humanistic, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But, I hate to say it, and this bothers me, because I'm seeing this a lot now. Have groups of people coming together always represented the very best of humanity?
Depends on what they're coming together for.
Well, I mean, you've got,
if you got a people coming together over a political issue, forget it.
You've got people coming together for a good cause, for a positive cause, for the civil rights movement. As you've seen, for the women's rights movement, for the gay rights movement.
Usually
then again, people come together for the Nazi movement.
It usually ends up into an argument, a fight. I hate that. Why can't we discuss political matters without, getting all up in everybody's business and driving everybody to drink.
Right, but you look at the Star Trek argument now, it gets so polarized. And I mean, I look at the Star Trek argument like this, and I wanted to bring this up. You know, a friend of mine recently brought this up, and I found it very hilarious. I don't know if I said it or not.
Yeah.
They were trying to invite me to some party in New York they were going to. They're from California, and they wanted to meet me in New York because it's closer to me. And they showed this room filled with people. Now, I remember saying that, well, you know, I'm not comfortable in huge groups or anything. I don't know if I'd be comfortable. Yeah. He remembers me saying, there are just too many people in the world. And he thought that I was reading, like, some book on population control. Like, I fixed my mouth to say that.
The Earth is spinning too slow because there's too many people on it. We got to cut down the population here.
I was like, maybe I said it, but I just found it hilarious that he thought I said that. It's like, I mean, imagine me going into a Star Trek and saying, there are too many Star Trek fans in the world. You know, just like a random statement. Like, what do you mean by that? We get there's a lot of them, but, you know.
I can see my father saying something silly like that. You know, there's too many.
And like I said, I can't imagine me saying that. I think what it was I said something about I'm not comfortable in large groups, but you know how people are with things. They hear something and it becomes something else.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it just came off to him that way.
Yeah.
But you know,
it's like you told me about how you when you start a message and by the time it reaches the last person, the message is completely different. You know,
Purple Monkey Dishwasher.
Yeah.
You know, which we can apply to the Star Trek world forever. I mean, you know, people. They add all this stuff. I mean, like I said, to be honest, Purple Monkey Dishwasher, we can apply that to Harlan Ellison for real.
Yeah.
Because he added so many Purple Monkey Dishwashers to his thing. It just was tumbleweed of situations. And like I said, I don't want to seem like I'm speaking ill of the dead. But again, this guy could have etched out at his cornerstone. I mean, that became him. Harlan, I guess, jilted Ellison. That became his character.
Yeah.
And like I said, he's a guy that referenced Star Trek people as not even a cult, but a downright religion. And the religion was not about Star Trek's principles. It was about buying as much Star Trek merchandise as possible. Which in terms of Star Trek merchandise, do you think there's any element of Star Trek merchandise seekers or people who buy things from Franklin Mint or collector's plates or toys or anything that could be described as cultish?
What about women that buy all the shoes they buy? You know, I mean, if you listen to Harlan Ellison about how, you know, Star Trek fans spend their money on all the stuff that, you know, Star Trek stuff, you know, I guess the same kind of argument could be applied to, you know, women that like to buy tons of shoes, you know, for whatever outfit.
Marcos.
Yeah, or, you know, guys that like to buy tools and, you know.
Or go to sports again.
Yeah,
you go to a sports fan's house and you're going to see all these little autographed baseballs and special bats and you know, I mean, I have this vision in my head. I go to a sports fan house, they have baseballs or footballs signed by players or baseball cards. You know, baseball cards, you collect hundreds of them.
Harlan Ellison himself had a room full of books. Does that mean he's cultish because he likes books?
No,
you know, I'm just saying.
That means he's Samuel Cogley, attorney at law.
Yeah.
That's what that means. Remember him? It's like, oh, you want to learn history? It's all in books. It's books and books.
Books, yeah.
And Kurt's like, oh, you're either an obsessed maniac or you're Samuel Cogley. He's like, it's all in books. It's all in books. So yeah, he could be a cultish guy, a book obsessed guy.
Yeah.
Like, I never use a computer against all of these books. You know, he's all super into this.
Everybody.
And even that woman's like, he's known for his theatrics.
Yeah, everybody's buys a lot of one thing that they like.
Actually,
you know, Ellison was kind of a little bit off.
You know, that was actually an interesting thing I just mentioned because that's where Star Trek kind of emphasized a certain fandom because it's clear that Samuel T. Cogley was an epic proportions bibliophile. Because remember, he's in that court quoting every literary quote he can think of.
Yeah.
You sense this guy is sitting there with 100 books around him, reading through every bit of them, trying to get all the information he could. This guy was an obsessive bibliophile. Because in the 24th century, you have computers, you have all this different access. Maybe Kirk got that book from Spock, but this guy is surrounded by all these books.
Yeah.
So, like I said, even in Star Trek, they have fandoms within Star Trek universe. Mm-hmm. Remember in Voyager, the Doctor had this kind of cult following. of a race that didn't know what music was.
Yeah, the stuff. Yeah,
And they thought he was the bastard of all music.
Yeah,
A hologram that was just trying to sing. I mean, I always get a kick out of that because these people who know mathematical equations are listening to a hologram singing, "Someone's in the kitchen with done." To us, it's funny, but it's like, oh, they're hanging us every word. Like,
yeah.
Oh my goodness, this is Beatlemania to us. You know, he could have sang the friggin' duty roster, and they would have been, "Oh, can I have your autograph?" It was just I wonder if some of that was kind of in jokes on the Fandom, though.
Yeah, and then when you hear their song at the end, the song that they make, and it's like, oh, God, everything's like weird,
Well, because they're basing it on a fractal equation. They're thinking of it as a mathematical thing.
Yeah.
They're not seeing music with any art or any emotion.
Yeah.
And so as a result, you get this song that sounds like, I guess you could say, some prog rock group made a mistake. Like, remember that thing? Like, and all this stuff.
Yeah. It's just making
like,
sounds.
It sounds like, I don't know. Like they're doing it all technically, but there's no. And like you said, this is all outside my register. This is an emotional thing with humans.
Yeah.
And I just found it interesting how they examined. Well, there was that one with The Rock too. Didn't that kind of examine sports fandom to a degree?
Well, yeah,
I know that was a forum for The Rock to appear. I get that, but like I said, I don't go back to that really.
Yeah, because they had wrestling coming on after
because that basically was like, okay, we're gonna have wrestling on UPN now. Let's slap a wrestler that's big now onto the show.
Yeah.
But the idea of exploring sports fandom a little bit, and the fanaticism with blood sports.
Yeah.
But I will say this: I don't remember, but I've heard of a couple wrestlers and a couple wrestling fans who were big into Star Trek.
Mm.
So I mean, but then again, like I said, I don't remember outside of Enterprise because they were right up next to wrestling half the time. Mm-hmm. But wrestling really didn't go into Star Trek much. I noticed it was more the football that preempted Star Trek.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But like I said, with the sports thing, I never got that why a lot of the sports people would accuse Star Trek fans of being more obsessed.
And we accept it in society that sports fans can get that fanatical about sports. We don't even think anything of it,
Right, but then they'll say, well, you guys are weird because you're Star Trek fans and you act weird. You act weirder than us. No, we don't.
Yeah. You won't see the same word cultish used for a sports fan, a bunch of people.
And like I said, that could go into something a lot deeper. That could go into ideas of toxic masculinity. That could go into ideas of cultural superiority.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that could go into some really dark places, to be honest with you, because it's like politics. If you take it to the extreme.
Yeah.
And use the word to describe how people want to conduct and measure law. Draconian.
Yeah.
They'll put the hammer down really strong. And I think that sometimes that does happen in these situations, unfortunately. And I think that I haven't really heard anybody put the hammer down what they're doing now in Star Trek. Because to me, if they put the hammer down that strong, that would seem kind of cultish to me. But I really haven't ever heard anything that strong-armed.
Yeah.
Like, I never heard anybody say, suppose Discovery should be taken off the air. Any evidence of its existence should be purged from the media.
If anything, it's CBS Paramount that's been sort of draconian with the fans by coming down on the fans so hard on the internet for making their own little videos and stuff like that.
Because they're saying, you're absolutely wrong, there is no other way it could be, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, they're telling us to shut up and take what they're making, and we're not allowed to, even have any thought about
Right,
Star Trek, in a different way.
The most they should say is, well, this is just business. But no, they're acting like, this is the way it has to be now, and you must accept this.
Yeah.
And it is draconian. Yeah. So like I said, in the end of the day, half the time, is the Star Trek community, fan, whatever you want to call it, is that really the cultish problem? Or is it the perception of them as being that way?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back, again, that goes back to like the early days when, the generation before us that grew up, that was born like in the 40s or something like that, and they look at Star Trek as something goofy or comic booky or something like that. They just think it's,
right, the perception of it is different.
Yeah, and that got carried over for a long time, and I think it's still out there. I mean, I still run into people that, when you tell them, oh, I like watching Star Trek, they kind of give you that look, a little bit, like, okay,
Well,
no, just
I had an interesting experience with my grandmother once.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Grandma.
Yeah.
My grandfather, he was one of these guys. He was usually a Western serial in the theatrical theater type guy, not even TV.
Yeah.
And he thought that Star Trek, here we go again, was nothing remotely like real life. And I shouldn't believe it. Like, I was looking at it like that. I was looking at it as a future thing.
Yeah. See, immediately they start off with the wrong
okay. So I figured if that's the way he thinks, but my grandmother was like, oh, well, I don't know much about sci-fi. It's usually space stuff or whatever. So I rented the Star Trek video, and it was The Naked Time. I'd never seen The Naked Time. So I said, okay, you want to see this? There's nothing else on it. Said, okay. Now remember, this is my grandmother. This is a woman who watches those Rock Hudson, Doris Day movies. So we turn this thing on, and all of a sudden you get into this, I'll take you home again, Kathleen. I'm thinking, uh-oh, am I giving her the wrong?
Yeah.
But actually, to be honest with you, that the Enterprise is spinning towards Psi 2000, and my grandmother, who was kind of not well, she's sitting there like, what's going to happen? She was getting into this.
Yeah.
Like, are they going to make it? And then in the end, there's this part where Spock is going through that emotional torment of trying to control his emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And she's sitting like she's watching a love scene. And she's getting right into this story and these characters.
Yeah.
And she's like, this is not what I expected.
Yeah.
There was drama and there was comedy here, and this was interesting.
Yeah.
And she was like, I can see why you like this. This is not what I thought. She thought it was going to be like Buck Rogers or something.
Yeah.
And like, look, no, this is the different thing. These are characters that you can do more with genuine human comedy here. You can do more with risk and with humanity and life and death and love and loss. And you could tell all these stories that the science fiction was mostly about like superhero type stuff, like we said, like kind of old school.
Yeah.
And she understood at least. I mean, I don't think she sat around watching Star Trek all day until years later when I went up there because I wanted to see Star Trek Voyager, but I didn't have cable. And so we have a VCR, you can tape them. So I went up there and she goes, well, there's that woman from Ryan's Hope all of it. I said, oh, Kate Mulgrew. And she would watch it because like, they're going to be a captain. Like, you bet they are.
Yeah.
She's the first on this show. So she just really loved the idea of her being a female captain.
Yeah.
So she got into Star Trek through seeing what it was by me just presenting it, blank slate, here it is, see it for what it is.
Yeah.
See, and that's the thing, my grandfather, he had preconceptions about the show where I'm like, I can't reach him because he already thinks he knows what it is.
Yeah.
And if he watches it, he's going to see it through that lens.
Yeah, it's like my dad was the same way. Yeah.
Like I said, even if he watched the show, he'd still see it through the lens he had.
Yeah.
Yeah. But my grandmother was like, well, I don't really know much about it. She had her preconceptions sort of, but it was like, I don't really know. But it's like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is like a movie. This is well written, and this is interesting. And I mean, she'd seen Spock before. She knew who Spock was. I mean, he's a iconic base character. She knew this and all that. But when she saw this, like this guy has this character and these emotions and these conflicts, and this is like watching a movie with Cary Grant or something. There's like this importance to this character, and like she recognized it in a very theatrical way. And I think that's why Star Trek is important. I mentioned on the podcast the thing about the adventure show aspect of Star Trek. People would sometimes say, "Oh, that's just a good adventure show."
Yeah,
we keep getting offered now this adventure show aspect of Star Trek, and again, we're being told that that's what it is now. Accept it.
Yeah, that's where we're going with it. So,
and maybe you're right. Maybe we're not being cultured about that because people like you and I, and assuming from what they're saying, people like Stuart and Samuel over at Trek Yards are seeing Star Trek as something that spurred technological advancements in our real life, something that spurred social advancements in our real life, something that's put out ideas that maybe we don't articulate in our real lives, we could in this future world. Is that worth destroying over a cliche? So like I said, is that cultish behavior, or is that more somebody looking for real, genuine, authentic? I sound so stupid using words like that. I just honestly, when people use words like that, it sometimes sounds pretentious to me. You know, like, I'm sure you've heard people in regard to the Star Trek fan community overuse the word authentic.
Yeah.
Almost like, well, we're so much better than you. You know, so I don't say authentic stuff because it sounds like, oh, well, we're just Star Trek better, but it's more like, you know, it was what it was. It was constructed to be what it was, despite what Harlan Ellison said. Because his whole thing was that Gene Roddenberry just wanted money, blah 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 blah. But that's his thing. But no, there was something more within that. There was a need. There was something that he felt needed to be there, and the money was the icing on the cake. I mean, you need to live.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'll put it this way: if Gene Roddenberry or people like him had just thought of Star Trek as a cash cow, he couldn't know what they're doing to it now. Well, they came close to it in season 3. We've discussed that off camera. But I mean, they could have turned Star Trek into just like, let's just put every friggin' weird thing in there to sell toys.
Well, that just proves your point again that, you know, if Roddenberry was just in it for the money, he'd have been in it all that season, and he really
he could have Batmanized the whole show.
Yeah, he would have gone that route, but he didn't. He didn't. When he saw that they wanted to go that route, he said, "I'm out of it. You know, you guys do what you want with season 3, but I really don't want to have any involvement in it because this is not where you're, you know." So, he was just tired of it. So, I mean, I guess when he did Star Trek: The Next Generation, he'd go right back to old school Star Trek, you know, philosophy. You know, when
it's all about the Benjamins.
Yeah.
You know?
It wasn't just an adventure story, and it wasn't just, you know, what J.J. Abrams' version of Star Trek. It was a continuation of his philosophy.
And like I said, it wasn't even Alien of the Week.
Yeah.
I mean, it was more like there's these characters all have some importance, even if you see them once.
Yeah.
Whatever. The Edo, the Melkorians, whatever alien they had on the episode, they were important to that episode. They weren't just there to be like, let's sell toys with them.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
those decisions about toys weren't even anything
right.
never actually dealt with. I mean, it was this, you know, people at Paramount or CBS trying to maximize their profit.
I'm sure you've heard this.
You know,
that, oh, this show and that show, there were this goes with a lot of 80s stuff. They'll say that show is only to sell toys. I'm sure you've heard this. Transformers was a big one, and if you know Transformers history, the toy preceded the show.
Yeah, the interest in the toy is what made it. Yeah.
So they made the show around the toy. The toy was the show wasn't made to sell toys. The toys came first.
Yeah,
and that's one of the shows they would say, "Oh, that was just to sell toys." No, the toys were there first.
Yeah,
they just built the toy show around the toys.
Yeah,
they were already selling the toys, so it wasn't a consequence.
Yeah.
I've heard it said about Star Wars. Star Wars was just to sell toys. And we know how long it took them to merchandise that.
Yeah.
They had to sell kids an empty box.
Yeah, they were caught completely off guard. They didn't think that was going to be something that, you know, would be sellable as toys, I guess. You know, they didn't know.
And I mean, you know, we discussed it before. My Little Pony. The reason why people thought that was produced toys, well, it's obvious. Hasbro produced it.
Yep.
And I guess that argument works a little bit better because it does seem like if a toy company produces it, maybe they are. But there's this trope that everything in the 80s was to produce toys. I've heard that about Next Generation. That was only to produce little toy communicators and little tricorders and little Picard figures or things we don't even make, you know, whatever. Or speckled datas, whatever it is. But like I said, it's I think Gene's view was that if the show works, then we'll have somebody else do the merchandising for it.
Yeah.
I don't think he personally merchandised stuff. I mean, I don't think he had the time or really the interest.
No.
I mean, he was a creative person. He wasn't. I mean, did Gene Roddenberry have much time to go in and work with marketing?
You know, there's such an industry around something that becomes popular that, you know, the creator actually kind of becomes the lower man on the totem pole than you think.
Exactly. If anything, Roddenberry was kind of.
I mean, take a look at the Harry Potter. Take a look at the Harry Potter books. I mean,
J.K. Rowling. She didn't personally go in there to every marketing meeting and say, "This is how you got to do it."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it started off as books, and then it just got spiraled right out of control. I mean, she obviously could not spend all that time deciding.
Well, that's why they always joke in that song. You get the brain, I get the brawn. Let's make lots of money. One person doesn't go in there
Yeah,
and just say, "Well, I'm going to make this and make all the money." There's
yeah,
other people in the background doing that.
yep,
And
exactly.
that's, I think, the issue with Ellison's argument. He thinks that Gene Roddenberry was the real money man behind it, and that wasn't his thing.
Yeah,
If he guarded anything with any,
he
with
may. You see,
heaviness, it was a creative end.
he may have thought that in his early day when he wrote City on the Edge of Forever. But I think he matured, and he probably figured out that's not so after he got more involved with TV stuff, like Babylon 5 and things. And I think he probably got to see more of the workings behind things in Hollywood. And so I think for him to say that in later years, I mean, I think he was just throwing mud on the wall to see what would stick. You know what I'm saying? It was just
Yeah, I guess to a point where it's just like, nah,
I mean, you can excuse it, when you're young and you're first getting started and things like that, and you didn't know. But after a while, when you're in your 50s and you've been doing this for 30 years, then you should know by then that this is not the way things work. Now you should have, understand.
Okay. Just to kind of close this up, is there anything else you want to discuss in regard to this issue of Star Trek cult fandom?
No, I think we covered it. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for anybody who's been looking or watching. We don't have a big fan base yet. We're not sponsored by Patreon or Audible or any of those things. We're trying to do a DIY. I want to keep trying to do a DIY. I want to keep making it work DIY. It's kind of the spirit of what we're doing. If we can get sponsorship, cool. We're trying to do it. We're trying to go our own way with it. So I wanted to thank all of you who have waited patiently, who are interested in seeing us with good audio.
Yeah, finally.
So, after I mean, I'm going to thank Jeff right here. I mean, in front of all of you, and I've thanked him many times when you haven't been looking. He's actually jumped over every bear over this. He's called companies, really put out for this. So, Jeff, thank you for going through all this stuff to come to the conclusion that we need to use another computer. But thank you for doing it anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, even though we ended up doing a simple thing in the end, I'm glad you really care about this because I know I do. I mean, I know there's a million, Star Trek opinions out there, but I just want us to be added to the pot,
Yeah.
Because everybody's got a new thing to add to it. And like I said, that's why I call this TrekPrime. It's like, there's a reason why people want, they were calling it classic Star Trek a few years ago.
Yeah.
Not TOS, not the classic, like classic Coke.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? They may start calling it Coke Prime now.
Coke Prime.
I mean, if that's where they're going to start doing things that are classic, because classic is so overused. Like, oh, it's Coke Prime now. That's the real thing,
Yeah.
So I just use that analogy, but whatever. I was going to call this Trek Classic at first, but I think I'd seen variations of that. So I thought, nah. Because I don't know if you remember, years ago, they used to call TOS Classic Star Trek.
Yeah.
And but
now that you've got all these spin-offs of it, and it's been years since they've been off the
it was
air.
Classic Star Trek. That's why they abbreviated TOS.
Yeah. So now when you say Classic Star Trek, they're thinking, well, which one? Next Generation or TOS? So
originally, it was just Star Trek.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah,
Just
that was
Star Trek. It wasn't Star Trek: The Next Generation or Voyager. It was a Star Trek.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't go in and change it to Star Trek: The 23rd Century Generation or something like that. Yeah. Or The Adventures of Captain Kirk or something. They didn't go back and change it to that.
Yeah.
So it's always been Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they later called Star Wars The New Hope, but it was originally just Star Wars.
Yeah.
They added New Hope later, but it was, and people call it New Hope now, but it was just Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, this is another Star Trek thing, but if you hear someone call the first movie Star Wars, does it bother you they don't call it The New Hope, or do you care?
Well, no, because I'm old enough to know what they're referring to when they say that. But I think if, a younger person today, if you're going to talk Star Wars, you're going to have to say the episode name or call it episode 1 or 2 or 3, whatever it is. Then they know which one you're talking about. If you just say Star Wars, they're probably going to think the whole genre of Star Wars.
Universe, whatever.
But I know when someone's talking to me and they say Star Wars, I know they're talking about episode 4.
Right, because remember, when you hear the word Star Wars in your age group, you're probably thinking of Carrie Fisher with those cinnamon buns and everything, and just that look at that first movie.
Yep.
Because that was Star Wars. That was the Coke of Star. That was the real thing. That was the only one they had for 2 years.
That's right.
And then when they re-released it on VHS, they put that episode 4 thing on it.
Yeah.
And the New Hope, because it was just Star Wars at first.
Yeah. And then, like I said, my generation will call the second one Empire Strikes Back. They won't even say Star Wars. They'll just say Empire Strikes Back. We already know it's Star Wars. We know the name. So it's...
Well, it's like, Raiders of the Lost Ark was not Indiana Jones at all.
That's right.
It was a movie called Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
And later on, they added Indiana Jones to the later movies.
That's right. Yeah.
That's why you had Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Indiana Jones and Crystal Skull, or whatever. Yeah. Where Indiana Jones was a character in a movie called Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
And when they re-released it years later, they put it Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark. But originally, it was just Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That's right.
Which I didn't know for years because I always thought of Indiana Jones, but it actually was just called Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yep.
And they just, if you see the movie, that's all you see on the front.
That's right.
You don't see Indiana Jones before. I'm wondering if someone's going to go in and remaster the original show and just put Star Trek TOS on the bottom.
Oh, I hope not.
Like, we got to define this now.
Yeah.
He's like, let this be Star Trek, the real thing. Like Coke, like this is we just kind of know it's Star Trek with the yellow thing,
Yeah.
Or blue, depending on what season it is. Season 3 had the blue lettering, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That's why, just as a little joke, that's how I always knew what the seasons were. Season 1 and 2 were yellow, season 3 was blue. I wonder if they did that anyway. Why did they change the color?
I don't know, but bless you, they did a lot of weird things in season 3 there, especially the way William Shatner acted as Captain Kirk in that season.
Well, like I said, I guess it's not really a beat, but I guess we could kind of do kind of a semi-jokey thing just about. I mean, really, with TOS seasons 1 and 2, they are what they are.
Yeah.
With season 3, there's some just maybe we were doing character analyzations. Do you think it's much of a cliche to go into episodes or whole seasons or?
What, to compare seasons?
Well, no, not to compare them, but like season 3 of, say, TOS, an overview. Not an overview of episodes, but like an overview of the feel of the season or the show.
Oh, well, it's very, you can tell, actually, when you're watching the original series, you can almost feel a difference between season to season. If you watch it, you could see like the visual quality is just a little bit different from season 1 to season 2.
Yeah, season 1 of TOS had all that soft focus in it in season 1, didn't it?
Yeah, and then you could see a change again from season 2 into season 3, and
right. And then season 2 is very clean. Everything is very, very cleaned up and looks very good. Then in season 3, everything is really super defined. Yeah,
and colored. Everything's got color.
Yeah, they saturate everything. It's over-exaggerated. Where the first season is all soft and blurry and almost like they put Vaseline on the camera lens most of the show.
Yeah, that's right.
And they always play the Star Trek theme in the lounge version in the background during scenes.
Yeah.
Or you hear the little chimes or whatever. And then I think actually season 2 of that series probably looked the best.
Yeah.
Because, it really just was crisp. It looked good. When you see it remastered, season 3, it's like the colors, they just poured on the saturation.
Yeah, it's like I said, I think, there was a lot of attention in season 3 given to it in that way because of the way other shows were being filmed in that way. I was going to
say, before we go, if you notice on Deep Space Nine how the whole first season, it looks like there's a cavern of smoke over every character all the time.
Yeah, it seems like the background is always there's somebody cooking something and it's boiling over.
Right.
And
or it's like somebody's taking one of those little things and going, smoke coming out.
Yeah, it's like there's always a constant haze over everything, in the background.
Right. It's almost like you're in the smoking section of an old restaurant.
Yeah, and that went on for quite a while in there. That's very strange why they did that, but...
and then the second season didn't look that way, and then season 3 later, but that first season looked all smoky, and unless that was a feel they were going for, like this ship is on fire half the time, or the station's on fire, and So with
Yeah.
Klingon ships, we've talked about that, how everything on the Klingon ships look like they're fleeing their homeland.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
just,
metal beds and just old stuff and just everything really smoky on those
it
ships.
looks like there's a mist. You can't even look 10 feet away, and it seems like everything's kind of clouded over. Or
Right,
something.
like you see a Klingon emerge, you see them coming out of this big cloud of dry ice. It's all
It's very thick air. The air is really thick and humid, and it's like, God,
I was like, you turn the temperature down on this thing, and
yeah.
and
No wonder everything looks rusty in there, because there's so much moisture in the air. It's like, what the hell?
I mean, you never see on Federation ships. You never see these fiery bombs come out. Well, until that Next Generation where they had the fog rolling on them, that was a problem.
Problem with them. Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine if they had fog on the bridge the whole series?
I want London fog on my bridge all the time.
Oh, number one, did the fog roll in on us?
Ooh, you hear the horn?
Right. Yeah, blow the fog horn. Woo. Starting the fog generation.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, it's funny how each season are different. Like when I watched Deep Space Nine, even on Netflix, you can still see that smoky look in the background and everything.
Yeah, they didn't.
And then even when Cisco goes to planets, like on Bajor, it's still smoky on Bajor.
Yeah.
It's like, what is there fog on everything in this universe? There's fog on the space. There's fog on Bajor.
Yeah.
And then when he goes down to, remember the one where they go down to that planet where O'Brien has to be the, what was it called? He was kind of like some sort of hero. The Shirar, remember that one?
Oh yeah, it was like a story.
It was a weird episode.
Yeah.
And there was this Bajoran woman on the ship who was kind of bratty, and Nog and Jake were trying to mess with her. But anyway, and what is the Shiraz supposed to do? He's supposed to basically, send away this big cloud.
Yeah.
So everything in early Deep Space Nine is about clouds and fog. That's the whole cloud aliens. Well, there is one exception. Should I even go there? It's the Naked Now DS9. Alan Moraine counter. Sorry, I had to bring that up.
Yeah, that crazy game there where it was a virtual reality game.
Dance.
Yeah. No, jeez.
Honestly, I find it hilarious. They always skip that around here on the TV and the syndicated DS9. It's like,
I mean, if they're gonna put on TOS, why are they cutting out, that episode on Deep Space Nine, which is probably far.
Oh my God! Could you imagine if they had Dr. Bashir doing that? Oh well, you got to get to the end of this game by. I guess there were even some limits by Deep Space Nine to what they would do.
Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, let's be fair. I mean, if you're going to cut that out, then you got to cut the other one out, too, on the other side. I mean...
And, I think that's another thing about cultishness, is to end this off, too. I don't think a person who is a cultist could ever laugh with things. Because, I mean, we obviously love stuff, but we're laughing with it,
Yeah.
With a cultist person, it's like, oh, it's sacrosanct. You cannot laugh with that or at that.
Yeah.
And we're like, I'm not going to be sacrosanct about, no way.
Yeah, if it looks weird, we're going to laugh. I mean, I don't care what it is.
I mean, like I said, I remember when I saw we're talking about Plato's Stepchildren here, for those who don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
When I first saw that, I think I told you the other day, and I looked at that episode. Remember, I'm about 10 years old, and the reaction shots of Bones are that he's horrified, and they're telling him, oh, so if you don't stay here, you want to keep this going on. And then I look over what they're doing, and I'm thinking,
yeah. I mean,
how are they going to convince him to stay with these little 5-year-old tricks? I mean, really, if you wanted me to stay on a planet and use your telekinetic ability to manipulate me, would it do anything making my mother, my father, my best friend, tweedledee? No. I'd be more confused. Like, and you're doing what?
Let's just say that wouldn't be the choice episode I'd pick if I was introducing somebody to Star Trek for the first time in their life. That would be the turn off of the century. I mean,
but like I said, that wasn't my first Star Trek either. So
yeah. I mean, thank God that was Doomsday Device. That was mine. I mean, it was like.
Well, you picked one of the big ones because that's actually was a classic.
Yeah.
I mean, it may have had its theatrical moments in it and everything like that, but you know, nobody was, what? I'm sorry. I guess now
Just
that I
like
think
a
about it,
scene
that's
out of the Batman series at the time that it was on. You would have saw that, like Batman doing his
oh,
dance,
boy.
like.
So I guess the Batusi. You're just doing the Batusi, weren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. But like I said, I think we proved our argument here.
Yeah.
That would be cultish if we're sitting here laughing with something.
Yeah.
It's like, so I guess I answered my question. We're not any cult, Jeff and I. We're not.
No.
I mean, how can we be in a cult when we're sitting here thinking about, what? No. I mean, a cult is supposed to be, you don't understand. Kirk is praying for a very specific kind of reason. No. We don't know why that was done. We don't know what the. I just want to know what script looked like for that.
They could have gone a million different directions with that scene. Instead, they chose the most, weird way to go with it. So I don't know why they didn't think people weren't going to laugh their heads off at home. But I'll tell you,
and they lingered on all that stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, what were the directors
they lingered on that little ridiculous dance they were doing for 2 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, did they just improvise in the script, or did they actually write in this is what they had to do? I mean, this doesn't,
I'm just trying to think of them writing in Spock tap dancing around Kirk's head.
Yeah, how do you put that in a script? I mean, or
I just wonder, maybe the director had his 7-year-old kid come in and say, well, you direct them.
Yeah, you want to try? You want to play?
Yeah.
Here's my camera
today. Dance around. You breathe like a horse.
Want to use my camera today?
Like a little kid, He's like some 7-year-old directing that scene.
Yeah.
I can't get a picture of a grown adult directing that stuff.
Oh no, it certainly didn't come off like it was something made by an adult.
It's not like I'm gonna go out and get some mail and kid, you direct this.
Yeah.
That's the way it looked to me, like some little bratty kid directed this.
This is Mutiny! This is Mutiny!
I don't even know what that was. That was. As I say, maybe with the most ostentatious sense of condescension, what can we say but season 3 of TOS William Shatner? What can one say?
It was unforgettable, that's for
sure. That's its own little world. I mean, I've seen Shatner act in similar ways and other things, but never quite seen whatever that was.
Yeah. In the first 2 seasons, he acted normally. It was fine. It wasn't much that like that in it. But the third season, it's like, what happened?
They think of that guy who's
all these weird contortions and these these
miming,
emotional things that were like off the chart. I mean, it's like what was wrong with him? Why was he doing all this stuff? Maybe they just figured they knew this series was going to end, and they said, "The hell with it." We're just going to go. Give them a reason to
if you look at any movie or any TV parody, the one surefire thing to a punchline worthy mistake is by giving a person with little or no experience carte blanche over creative control.
Yeah.
Because I almost felt like Gene's leaving the show. We'll give the guy who basically changes the water on the cooler
Yeah.
I don't know. I gotta go back and study season 3. Who was involved? Who did what? I don't know.
We gotta look at the names because they gotta be held accountable here to this.
Like I said, when I think
Star Trek, because if they'd have had a season 4, it would have been so bizarre. It would have been insane. It would have probably killed Star Trek forever because nobody would have watched it after that. Just.
Well, maybe they figured, we're on 10 o'clock at night. We're in the graveyard slot. We'll do whatever we want.
Yeah.
Nobody's watching us. Until 3 years later, they go into syndication, and people see this episode. There was a finale; they didn't even air in the end.
Yeah.
So.
And as crazy as season 3 would get,
forget cultism. Star Trek survived its own final season.
Yeah.
Which, admittedly, had stories I keep going back to watch for the stories, but I have so much I really do have to ignore. I mean.
Yeah, you gotta.
It's like Geordie's visor. I have to filter out all this stuff.
Yeah, you gotta. You have a visual filter, to watch that. I mean, I'm not saying all that season was bad. There were some good episodes.
Right, like I said, a lot of the stories were actually plausible, but then they throw these bizarre things into it, and it's like, can we get to the point?
Yeah, I mean, like what was it? I don't know what the first episode was. Was it Spock's brain or was it the?
It was Spock's brain. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, that was a heck of a way to open up that season right there with that story, because that was like,
Yeah,
where
remote control Spock.
this wasn't even Twilight Zone worthy. I mean, it was like, where are we going with this?
Yeah, it's like you had this little plot
it was
here,
like,
and it just went into the theater of the absurd, I guess would be the best word for it.
Yeah, I mean,
Especially since we know that Spock's, and they even say it, Spock's so much more dependent on his brain, yet they can control him with a remote.
yeah, yeah,
It's just bizarre.
yeah. I don't know. It's the writing.
Basically, it's one big plot hole if you want to think about it that way.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, when they kind of clip it off, they regenerate Spock, and he actually explains what we just saw.
Yeah.
Like,
which was
why did you say all that in the beginning? We had to go through all this stuff,
Now we're learning what we were supposed to know during the show. Now we're going to cut it off.
And then both, I should have never reconnected his mouth. I would have been, if I were Kirk, I would have been like, hey, wait a minute. He's explaining the episode we didn't see before. Go on.
Yeah.
Like he's talking about the schism on the planet and stuff.
Yeah.
And all we saw was a bunch of women who didn't know what brains were.
Yeah.
Very undefined. Like, I know nothing about a brain. Like,
yeah.
Could you explain why?
Yeah.
This is Star Trek here. You don't just say random things and let them happen,
Yeah, really.
So like I said, it was really an example of bad writing, inserting characters that made no sense. Shatner's, shall we say, acting during that year.
Yeah.
And, or lack thereof. But anyway, this whatever. And, I mean, but like I said, the most people remember Shatner with before that was the way he fought. Which was unusual, but still, Kirk was a sound character.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he just...
could you imagine if Shatner had started in season 1 acting the way he did in 3?
Yeah, I don't think they would have been able to take his character seriously.
I mean, could you imagine in The Enemy Within if he'd been part of our intruder in that?
Oh, man.
Like, you're literally an evil double and you're having a diva tantrum. I mean, in that one, he was convincingly out of it. I mean, he wasn't throwing tantrums. It was just, I don't know. I think they didn't care by the end.
Yeah, they couldn't have. I mean,
people pick on the end. People pick on the end of season 7 of TNG. But I remember watching that, and there were some writing issues I suppose they had in season 7. But to me, there was a fine wine thing about it. Fine wine has sentiment on the bottom, but it's really congealed very well. Season 7, the characters all were kind of saying their goodbyes, and there were all these concluding stories. But the characters, we all got to know them. They all aged, and they all had their experiences.
Yeah.
You never saw a final season of a Star Trek that went that off the headboard.
Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine if Janeway acted like that in season 7 of Voyager? If she went into some Shatner mode? I guess maybe the series, by that point, they cared a lot by the end. Like, we got to wrap this up. We got to make it look good.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, it seemed like the final seasons of Deep Space Nine and Voyager seemed kind of rushed and hurried. But
still, the characters were not that out of kilter.
Yeah, they didn't make the actors portray these characters in a lighthearted fashion where you go ahead and do what you want kind of thing. They were still respectful for the characters they acted, and the actors treated it right to the end. Whatever material they were handed, they did it well.
I mean, people were saying that, well, the Doctor seemed like a bit more of a windbag in season 7, and I said, well, he's kind of a windbag in most of the show. That was the trait of the character.
Yeah.
He was kind of pompous.
Yeah.
They didn't really change anything about him. If anything, he became a little more nuanced.
Yeah.
And I mean, 7 of 9 didn't really change at all, did she? She kind of just was, well, she changed a little bit in her perceptions, but her character was basically the same.
Yeah, except for the way they, all of a sudden, she's dating Chakotay, and it's like...
Right, but she wasn't dating Chakotay, changing her personality. It was just...
Yeah. But yeah, essentially, I mean, she just, interacted better with the crew towards the end,
But like I said, again, she was still 7 of 9. They didn't totally change how her character worked.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I think with Sisko sometimes, it did seem like they would alter his character whenever the religious component came into it. Like, the Sisko is a prophet thing. If he was a commander, he was very no-nonsense. But there were times when he was into that, the emissary thing, when they were going into that, where he bordered a little bit on Shatner, but I don't know if that was written or if that's the way he thought that would be projected.
Yeah. I don't know, most of the time, you know, his character really seemed to just kind of muddle in the kind of a grim kind of way, you know what I'm saying? It was like he's very, very subdued sort of approach.
Well,
You know?
I remember there was one episode where he was involved in this finding this Bajoran city that had been buried, and I felt like Bones talking on Charlie X, like, oh, I was talking to Spock, and he goes into some sort of poetry.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
The reason I say that is because in the episode, all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, Cisco starts singing all of his dialogue, basically.
Yeah.
And then gets that Cassidy Yates into doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, whenever the character touches on this emissary thing, does he need to turn into an opera? That's the way they were kind of making it. Like, this is the Cisco opera. We're going to sing every scene, you know. Everything just became very sing-songy and a little overacting, but again, it wasn't Shatner's.
Yeah.
It was just like, you know, it was almost like he wanted to be Charlton Heston as Moses or something.
Yeah.
Like, I've got to be the super huge character as the emissary, where I'm more nuanced and more no-nonsense as Cisco.
Yeah.
But as the emissary, I've got to talk from on high, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe it's a little more appropriate, but that was the only time I ever got a little, oh, come on, you know, just, that's why I wanted the emissary thing to go away, because it didn't really bring out the best in the character. It just made him too heraldic, and I prefer seeing Cisco as more of a commander.
They were never really clear on where to go with that aspect of his character, so
it doesn't make him overdo the characterization of that. But other than that, again, imagine if they made Kirk the emissary or something.
I just can't wrap my mind around that idea.
No, imagine they started season 3 with him being the emissary to some alien species, his religion, and then have the same acting mechanic.
If he was being induced to have it, then that would be an excuse for him to act that way.
Well, I guess that might have worked out if he had been getting words from on high, but still it would seem a little strange. I have to admit that.
Yeah, I mean, it would. Yeah, I mean, it would still look funny. I mean, just the idea, but it's just, you know, I think, you know, in regards to like Plato's Stepchildren, you know, they could have handled that a lot differently where it wouldn't look so funny, you know what I'm saying? And where we weren't be sitting at home.
Right, well, if you have telekinetic powers, you can force people into gladiatorial battles.
Yeah.
You don't make them dance around.
Yeah, anything but these childish things that, you know, and Dr. I mean, DeForest Kelley was the saving grace of that scene.
His reactions made it seem like it was horrible.
Yeah, I mean, he was the only reason why he was trying to make that scene seem more serious than it really was, because it just, if he was laughing behind that guy, I mean, we all would have been laughing, because it was just, you know, your mother would have been laughing when she watched that, you know, she wouldn't have been like,
tuning into him.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, boy, nice cutscenes, people. You know, I know he wasn't standing there serious looking at these people dancing around and riding like a mule.
And like you said, that was a hell of a way to cut a scene and go to a commercial break right after, you know, while he's sitting there going, like, yeah, now let's talk about Cheerios, and you know what I mean? Like, boy, our minds are like still absorbing what we just saw, you know, and now we're going to a commercial break. You know,
like, how are we gonna come back into this?
Yeah.
Are they gonna have Kirk with a little mask on his face, like a little horse mask or something?
Yeah.
I mean, they could have gone totally cosplay after that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess we've actually veered into that theater of the absurd, but it helped explain how if Star Trek admirers can discuss things in this way, cult, we are not. So, okay, thank you for waiting for us, and I hope we'll see you next week. I would like to with a new story. This time, I'm going to pick an idea. I'm a little rusty, but I've got some ideas that have been flying around. So glad we got this done. See you next time, everybody. Live long and prosper, and thank you.